How's it going, guys? It's Poetry Set, and welcome to a little guide on the institutions mechanic for EU4 with the Rights of Man expansion, or the Prussia patch. If you're not buying the expansion, you still have access to these features that really change the way that the tech works in the game. It is one of the biggest changes to the game ever, I think. The only one I can think of that might be bigger was like the whole forts mechanic thing, you know? So it's a huge change to the way the game has worked, and the way the game works. And I'm going to be doing my best to explain it. Now, keep in mind, this is only 4 or 5 days after I've had the game. You should be watching this, if you're watching this, right when it comes out. This video is coming out right when the expansion should be going live. So hopefully this will be helping out some of you guys who are looking forward to getting into the game, but want to know how the institution system works, and hopefully this will help you understand. First, I think it's going to be a little bit weird of a guide in that we're actually going to hop around quite a bit, I think. What I want to do is, first, let's start as, let's start as Aragon. I've been playing as Aragon on stream. Just do this. Let's start as Aragon, and let's just, go in speed 5 till we hit the first institution, which should be fairly easy to do. Again, this might lag out the video, because I'm going to go in speed 5, which, overloads the processor. But let's start talking about it. So, if you don't know, the way tech used to work in EU4 is that it would, okay, that's an interesting thing. I tell you what, let's ally France so no one attacks us. I don't want it to deal with anything. So basically, if you don't know, the way tech used to work in EU4 is you had tech groups, right? And if you had to, if you didn't want to have these penalties, if you're a non-Western nation, if you didn't want to have a penalty to your tech, you would have to Westernize, which took a lot of monarch points. It didn't really make sense in a lot of cases, and it was kind of a dumb issue that a lot of people had with the game, because it's just sometimes it was just kind of a weird mechanic. You would be Tunis, playing as a nation that you could conquer all this Italian land that's like the center of learning historically during the Renaissance, and then not get any, benefit from this technologically speaking. And the way institutions works, it doesn't replace tech groups altogether, but it does actually, it does affect the way that tech spreads. And I think the reason that they have kept tech groups is mainly just so that I think it's, what is this? Don't worry about any of this. Again, I just want to fast forward so we can actually see a real live birth of an institution. But basically, they kept the tech groups so that they could have the unit types and stuff. But anyways, regardless, the way tech works now is with these institutions, and basically you go to the technology screen. This is where you see some of the options for this. You go to this show institutions button, and that's how you see all this. So right now we have no penalty for this, and everyone in the world that has feudalism to start with, feudalism being the first institution. Let's stop here for a sec. Feudalism is the first institution. Any country in the world that has feudalism is going to start with 0% tech penalty. And we can't see it right now, but that includes Ming. Places like Ming in Japan that have feudalism, they actually have the same tech cost as a Western nation at the start of the game now, which is really, really interesting. And so feudalism, most people in the world start with it. However, there are places that you can see that don't start with it. For instance, Tugurt, Digerid, Fazan, the Golden Horde, Kazan, Horde nations don't start with it, Crimea, and it kind of makes sense. And I'm not going to get into too much depth because I want to explain this once we see the birth of a new institution. And again, I'm sorry this is taking a little while, but, this is going fairly quickly, I think. And basically, I just want to show you this because it's really cool when it happens. But basically, you have these things that sort of affect the spread of technology and the spread of the... It's actually more like a spread of penalties, almost. You're spreading it around to try and not have penalties, whereas people who can't get it as quickly because they're not in a position that they could get it, they will start getting penalties. So basically, everyone starts, or most people start on a level playing field, except for people that don't have feudalism. And then the tech progresses in a way where people who historically, for the most part, had access to, the centers of learning and stuff, and had access to these trade routes and stuff, that were influenced by these ideas, they get the tech first. And I really like it so far. And we're almost to the point where we'll be able to see this. But yeah, so basically, they start in 50-year intervals going up to the year 1700. And in my experience, I've only gotten up to global trade, but hopefully that'll be good enough for the purposes of this little guide to help you guys. And I do know I have gone to future start dates to look back and see what the other influencers are of these things. So I can hopefully be able to illuminate you guys on that as well. But let's just come up to here, and any month now. The game gets a little laggy, like I said. But anyway, so yeah, 50-year intervals. This first one is starting with the Renaissance. So it is now 1450, and we're going to wait till the Renaissance starts, and then I will show you guys how it works. So I will probably put an annotation in at the beginning of the video saying if you want to skip to this point, you can click on it, and if you're joining us for that, then welcome. But if you didn't want to listen to me talk about the changes in general, but any month now, I've normally it pops up within, like, 2 or 3 months, so this is kind of surprising, honestly. No, do that. Again, I'm not playing this game. I don't care at all. I just wanted to see the whole Renaissance thing. That whole thing I was told about. Okay. Where is it? This is strange. Normally it pops up. So basically, this is this date is it's like the earliest day that it can appear, but it can appear later, as you're seeing now. Normally it appears fairly quickly after, but I think it's just a random event, I don't think there's anything that necessarily affects it in a super way of delaying it. Here we are. Okay, so the Renaissance. So there's all these, there's this cool thing talking about cultural movement, yada, yada, yada. But anyways, I'm not going to read it off. You can read it if you'd like, but I'm sure you'll want to experience that for yourself. But basically, this marks the start of the Renaissance. And one thing I really like about it, I don't want to make this a review, this is a guide. One thing I will say that I really like about it is the fact that they have this little icon here. It reminds me of like something, I've said this several times in my videos, but it reminds me of something you can see in Civ 5, where it's a nice little like kind of icon marking a unique place. So it started in Venice, in Venezia, which is fairly, like, it kind of hit Venice fairly early on. I think it hit like Florence first, and then like Milan, but then Venice soon after. But anyway, so basically, I think, as far as I know, it is scripted to appear in certain regions. I think it can appear anywhere in Italy. I think that colonialism can start in England or France or Castile or Portugal. I'm not even sure about France, but I know England, I know Castile, and I know Portugal. And I know printing press starts in Germany, or not necessarily Germany, but the HRE, I believe, in general. The printing press is weighted there. Global trade, I believe, can start in like the lowlands. It can start in France or Castile or Aragon or even in Italy as well. I do not know actually where the manufactories are weighted to start, and I don't know where Enlightenment are weighted to start, but I would assume those would be like France and England and stuff. But anyways, regardless, basically, we have this institution, and it has been born in this one place, in Venezia. I've seen it be out of the games I've done, this is like maybe the 4th start I've done to this point. So let me just list off. I've seen it start in, I believe, Firenze, I believe Cremona, and I believe Ferrara. Yeah, so something like that. So basically, most of the time it's in northern Italy, and that's fairly accurate. I think it's nice that it's kind of historical. And when embraced, it gives you build cost, and this thing, which means development cost. It's a little bit of a bug, I think, being in the beta patch, but that means development cost in German. I think it's just they didn't replace it with the right words in English. But anyways, and basically every year after the birth of the Renaissance, so after every year now, there will be a 1% tech penalty added to any country in the world that has not embraced the Renaissance. So, how do you embrace it? Well, basically, to embrace an institution, you have to have at least 10% of your development having the Renaissance. And what I mean by this is that it actually has, every province can either, it's binary. Basically, every province either has it or doesn't, and there is progress, so I guess it's not really binary, but, you know, every province progresses getting the Renaissance at a certain rate, depending on criteria, and that's most of what we're going to be discussing, but, you know, there's these criteria that affect how fast it spreads. Once it spreads, then it's considered to be there, once it reaches 100%. So, like in Verona, it's going 2.4% per month, Treviso, about 2%, Friuli, about 1.5%, and once it reaches 100%, then it is present. And you can embrace an institution once it is in 10% of your country, based on development, which is also modified by autonomy. So it's pretty dynamic, actually. It's most things aren't that dynamic in this game, in my opinion, in my experience. But basically, if you have a lot of high development land, one province, or if you have like only 5 or 6 provinces, but they're high development, having one province get the Renaissance could put you over that limit where you can embrace it. However, you have to actually spend money, like actual money, not points in this case, which is surprising almost, but you actually spend money to embrace it, and the amount of money you spend is based on how much of your country does not have it embraced. So the more of your country that you're basically forcing to embrace it, the more money you have to spend, which kind of makes sense from a historical perspective. It's like, you know, instead of letting it spread naturally, now you're taking over and spending to open academies or manufactories or printing press places. You know, you're kind of corporatizing it, I guess. I don't know. Seizing the means of production. Yeah, I'm just gonna. It's a meme, not really a meme. It's like 200-year-old meme. Yeah, I don't know. I'm just in a goofy mood tonight. But anyways, yeah. So it's really interesting that you could wait and let it spread naturally, and have to pay less money. But also, the longer you wait, the more you'll rack up those tech penalties. However, if you're not going to spend on tech for a couple of years, maybe you'll want to wait. In my opinion, though, normally it doesn't make a huge difference either way. Normally you want to do it fairly early on. Anyways, so what are these things that actually affect the spread of the institutions? Well, it's really cool. One of the things I really like, and I think makes it obvious that Paradox has put a lot of work into this system, is the fact that it actually is different for every single institution. I have not, like I said, I have not seen the manufactories in action. I have not seen Enlightenment in action, but I've seen every other one of these. So 2/3 of them I've seen in action, and I can tell you quite a bit about each of these. So, and again, I don't want to make this video too long. I want to be about 20 minutes long, so we'll try to go ahead and do it fairly quickly. But basically, the Renaissance, you can see all of the stuff here, and let's just go ahead and hover over this screen. So over here is where you see the open-close institutions thing. Let's open it up and hover over this. So, and I've actually talked about this quite a bit, but the way it spreads kind of reminds me of Vicky 2 with some of the way it, judges criteria and grows things, or, assimilates provinces, or sees if they need to immigrate or not, the pops, But anyways, it's very interesting. So basically, there's a whole bunch of criteria, and certain places fit more than one. Certain criteria are stronger. So basically, 2.4 per month is actually really, really strong. That's a really, really fast growth rate. The nearby friendly province has Renaissance is interesting. In my experience, nearby friendly province means just that. It means a friendly province, like an ally or a friend, or I think neutral might count as well, but hostile or outrage, those will discount that. Provinces in the Flanders, Tuscany, or Venetia area. So that is something that's unique to the Renaissance. Basically, anything in the Flanders, Tuscany, or Venetia area, so up here, or in Flanders, gets a solid buff, even if it's not the birthplace. So let's go to the institutions map mode, under economic map modes. So Flanders up here is really far away from the start of it, but they're getting 1 a month, which is actually quite a bit. It may seem a lot less, but that's because Verona, this is kind of like a 1, and it's like, look at these are really low, you see, and that's like kind of like the average to start with. But yeah, so it's really high here, but it's also pretty high in Flanders. So normally what you see is this area gets really strong really quick, but then this area starts to catch up fairly quickly. European 10 development province and European 20 development province. So having a lot of development can actually help early on. For example, look at this. Up here in Denmark. Denmark is nowhere near close to the start of the Renaissance, but they're actually starting to get a little bit, so that once the other modifiers reach them, like the adjacent province, once it spreads through borders, which is normally what finishes it off, it'll take less time because it will already have a head start from having a good bit of development. Normally, you're not going to have to rely on that to actually put you over the top. Normally, by the time you're, getting towards halfway done with just this, then you'll start having the adjacent provinces show up through the natural spread of things, and that'll help you a lot. But yeah, basically, you have all these things. You have adjacent province has Renaissance, so it spreads through borders normally, and Italian capital. So if it is a capital in Italy, it doesn't mean if your capital is in Italy, then your whole country gets it. It's no, if the city itself is an Italian capital, then that province will get a boost, and it's a small boost though. So anyways, that's how the Renaissance spreads, and so it spreads fairly dynamically, normally with all of Italy getting it fairly early on, because they're all, spreading to each other really quickly. They all are getting these things because they are in that area, and so it spreads really quickly throughout there. Then it spreads into Flanders, but naturally because it grows there. From there, it spreads through borders to everywhere else, and certain places will get it sooner, like Aragon and Castile get it fairly early on because it spreads from Italy. Valencia gets a head start because of the, some of these places have more development, so they already have a head start. But basically, it is developing other places, even if it's developing slower, and won't actually reach there for quite some time till it reaches there through borders. So it's really interesting. And I hope I've been fairly succinct with my description of that. So yeah, that's the Renaissance. And that's kind of like, it won't take us long to explain the other ones now that you know this, because of the fact that it's kind of just important to explain that, there's multiple modifiers and they're not all created equal. Like you see, some of those are stronger than others. And you need to keep that in mind if you're trying to plan on like growing in specific ways when you're a non-European nation and you want to try to abuse these features or use them to your advantage. So colonialism, unfortunately, we can't actually see what affects this, which is why we're actually going to go ahead and exit to menu real quick, and we're going to go ahead and look at some of this. It's going to give you guys a black screen for a second, so I'm sorry about that. But it should take like less than a minute. So basically, though, colonialism normally starts, like I said, in Spain or Portugal or England, or I haven't seen it in France, but I'm assuming it could possibly start in France as well. Let's go ahead. Although, I don't know, maybe not though, because France wasn't really big into the early colonialism game. Okay. Game should be coming up on screen in a second. Again, I apologize, but I do think it's important to show you guys this. There it is. So hopefully the game will load up quickly and we can jump back in to a later start or a later save that I have going on. Initializing map logic is good. It's normally like the last one. I don't think I've ever shown the loading screen in any of my videos, which is kind of funny. Never had a crash on the go or anything, I don't think. I apologize for this. It's going to be a little bit of a longer guide because it's quite a complex mechanic with lots of facets, and so hopefully you guys are okay with watching this 20-25 minute guide. If you want to learn about it, I hope it helps. Like I said, I haven't even seen the last two institutions because I have not played that much because I've only had this for 4 days. But I will try to explain what I have understood about at least the manufactories one, which is the second to last one. Okay, here we go. Should be popping up on screen any second now. Okay, there we are. Okay, let me make sure it's on screen. It is indeed. Okay, let's go ahead and we're going to hop in here. And we're going to hop into the game that I have the farthest in, which is this one. This Aragon one that I've been doing on stream. I have a dirty PU over France, and it's glorious. But anyways, let's just look at this. Don't pay attention to that. We're mostly just going to be focusing on the game and the institutions. So, in a second. Okay. Okay, there we are. Sorry for the delay again, but it's taking a while to load. There it is. Okay, so yada 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 yada. I don't care. So anyways, let's look at the institutions for this. So, and this will also be good to just kind of give you an overview of what the world might look like at any point in time. So, colonialism is affected by some different things. It's affected by, it's affected by these following things. Owners embrace colonialism. Oh, and that's one thing I forgot to mention. Once you embrace something, once you manage to embrace something, it spreads a lot quicker to all your other provinces, which it's not that important at that point because you already have it embraced and you already got the effects. It's not like it's scaled based on how much your land has embraced it. But it does actually matter, because then, you know, you might actually, sometimes I could see you tactically delaying embracing it so that the people next to you get it later. They don't get to get the natural border spread as quickly, but I don't know. Anyway, so it's owners embrace colonialism. Nearby friendly province has colonialism. Again, that goes by the same criteria. Port neighboring province with colonialism, and I believe that means neighboring through sea tiles as well. Port or capital in New World colonies homeland. So that means like colonial places can get it actually quicker. And colonial overlord has colonialism, so that subject nations get it quicker. So it's not actually, colonialism is actually quite harder to spread in my opinion. Colonialism only really goes by borders and by sea tiles. So in my experience, since there's no things that bring it up like the development limits, I also forgot to mention there's that European 5 development province post 1500, which is just what it sounds like. But colonialism actually starts, you know, let's say it starts in Spain. It'll, like in this game, it started in England. Let's go with that. So it spread into France soon after, and then it spread to Spain and stuff along the coast, and it started spreading up this way. But it didn't really reach inland for quite some time because it had to spread province by province through that neighboring friendly province. And so colonialism is much more limited to just border expansion. Printing press is quite interesting in that one of the main things I've noticed that boosts it up early on is if the state religion is Protestant or Reformed. So basically, in this game, it was a mess. Austria went Reformed even, but lots of people, basically everyone that is blue here got printing press before anyone else because it's actually quite a large modifier. I don't think I can actually show you guys because it's already embraced, but it's quite a big modifier. That's one of the things that's the heaviest influencers, is if it's if the person is Protestant or Reformed. There's a whole bunch of other ones, you know, if you have Diplomatic Tech 15, and that's basically, I think, to make it so that other nations in other parts of the world can naturally invent printing press without having to be, you know, limited to being influenced or attacked by European nations. They can actually get it on their own just later on to kind of stagger it, which is nice. So those are the main things there. And I'll let you guys figure out lots of these on your own. But yeah, and there's also the border spreading as well. Global trade is the last one I've had a lot of experience with. And as you can see, it's still not accepted by everyone in my game here. And we just recently embraced it. So we're still in the province of actually getting it accepted everywhere. So basically, the things that spread it, actually, let's go and look at one. So we can actually see this. So basically, owner has embraced global trade. So basically, one of the main reasons I'm able to get it right now fairly quickly is because we already embraced it, right? The main things are, if you have a stock exchange, that is a huge boost, but you can't get that till later in the game anyways. Again, that's kind of to stagger it, so places like Japan and China can get it naturally, but later. Stock exchange, trade depot, and marketplace all give tiny, tiny boosts, except for the stock exchange, which is large. Printing press is present, so if you have the previous one, you can actually get it quicker. And it is interesting because you can actually skip institutions in your country. I don't think it's super common, but yeah, port neighboring province with global trade, and that's basically it. So basically, it spreads mostly through ports and stuff, and it also has the if you do not if you do not have a port in a place, then it's a nearby friendly province, but it's less. So basically, yeah, so so it just kind of scales in different ways, and there's different ways it does it. So like up here, Oldenburg is going to be a while till they get it, because no port neighboring provinces have it yet. And that probably will be the case for a while, because I think global trade was born in my country in this game. Yeah, I was born in Nice, which I owned at that point in time. And so I got it first, and then it went to Italy and stuff, because they, because it's really close by and stuff. And Ferrara is my personal union, so it went to them really quickly. And Austria got it pretty quickly. Places like France and England will be later to get it. And up here, they're going to be quite a ways away from getting it. So anyways, it's really interesting. And the last thing I'll say is with the manufactories, I haven't actually gotten to that point in any games, but I went to a future date and looked back, and I wasn't able to see how it's scaled and how all the effects look, but I know that the effects that the ways to that it's spread are based on if you have manufactories built in your country. So it's really interesting. It seems to me like a way that they're trying to force you to maybe use these manufactories that aren't necessarily super commonly used, and I kind of like that. It gives these a lot more use to say that maybe you'll be able to get tech quicker at less penalty later on. So that's pretty interesting. And again, lots of it has to do about where it starts, which is was just semi-historical in how it is done, but it's also semi-random as well. But regardless, it's very interesting, and I really like it because another thing about it is that if you zoom out a bit, you can see it's kind of staggered. And let's take a second. This will be the last thing I do, I think, but let's take a second and look around the map at how the tech looks. So right now, we have everything. We have everything present in our country. Some provinces don't have it, but most of our country has it pretty much on lockdown with all of the above. France is just now getting global trade, right? So they're a little behind, as is most of Western Europe. And it's spread in interesting ways. I think in most games you'd probably assume that France and England or Great Britain would get it before Austria, but still, you know, that's kind of the fun, is that it's ahistorical to a certain extent. Hungary is just now getting it. And so most of the places have everything else in most of Europe. However, you go over here to Lithuania. There is different color here. And that is because these places in Lithuania and stuff are still working on getting printing press. Some of them don't even have any growth of printing press. Some of them don't even have colonialism yet. So it's really interesting, and that's because of a variety of reasons. It's just because, you know, because once you get to this point, there's no more boost for colonialism. You know, so basically the only things spreading it are the nearby friendly province. And so basically it's spreading really slowly through the borders. It's just spreading one province at a time. And so it kind of reaches slowly in, which is nice, because that's kind of a little more historical, I think. Whereas places over here, it might spread... I'm trying to look for a province. Places over here, maybe, might spread slower because or it might spread faster because they're on the coast, even if they're not as fast as places like us. So then, like Tunis, for instance, they're getting printing press, but they're actually getting global trade quicker because of the fact that they have a port neighboring province with global trade, but they don't have any of these other modifiers for printing press. So you can actually skip over some things and get them first. So that's an interesting aspect of things. Something else, like Ethiopia, they don't even have colonialism down here, and part of that is because they have no friendly provinces that are nearby that have colonialism. They have neighboring provinces that have colonialism in the Ottomans, but the Ottomans aren't friendly. So you can actually block people off from teching up or getting these institutions based on that. Let's go over to Asia. So Ming, in some parts of their country is getting global trade. Some parts even actually have global trade, even though they don't have colonialism or printing press. And some parts in the West don't only have feudalism, which is what Ming starts with in their whole country. So you can see it's kind of dynamic in that, like, the coastal areas that might have been more influenced by global trade historically and stuff, and then, like, in Japan, the same thing is happening, where those places that make sense to have global trade happening are getting it early on, even if they don't even have printing press or colonialism yet. And that kind of makes it so they're staggered out, but Ming is going to get some stuff, so they're not going to be super far behind, not as far behind as people that are closer to Europe even. So it's really interesting. I really like it. To me, it seems so far that it's fairly historically accurate. If you just zoom out, it seems like Europe is fairly advanced, right? North Africa isn't too far behind. The Ottomans aren't too far behind. Russia is a little bit behind in the eastern part, but not in the west, which makes sense. Persia is only like they're 2 or 3 behind. Kazakh and Mongolia are fairly far behind. Ming, some places are behind, some places are more developed. Places near the coast that were, very high population and you know, and stuff, and fairly advanced, and had their own renaissance of the time, you know, and in Japan as well. And so it's really interesting, and I really, really enjoy it, the way it spreads. Some places don't even have feudalism yet because of the way feudalism spreads. And I really think it's a great change to the tech system. Again, I'm not trying to make this a review or anything, or a critique of the game. But anyways, that's basically how it works. It's very interesting because it spreads dynamically. Make sure, in general, whenever a new institution gets, you know, arrives, make sure to try and know what actually affects its spread so you can take advantage of that. And if you can see any provinces, you can get even more detail and see exactly how it scales, which ones are more important to have as things that can influence your institution spread. And remember, you have to actually embrace it with money, so make sure to have some money saved up. It's more expensive if you're a bigger country, obviously. It seems to scale pretty well, though. And yeah, in general, I think it's a cool system. Hopefully, I've helped you with this guide. It's been a long guide. Wow, 30 minutes. Either way, thank you guys for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed this guide. It will probably be outdated in a couple patches, as they will probably make changes and balance it a little bit, but in different ways. But either way, I'm hoping they do more with it, like maybe do more with estates. They already have a bit. Do more with you know, government types. Do more with culture or something. It makes it so it spreads by culture. I don't know. It'll be really interesting to see. Either way, thank you guys for watching. I hope this guide has helped you. I have a bunch of other U4 guides if you're ever interested in those. And, you know, just give me your feedback in the comments below. If it ever does get outdated, tell me what gets outdated, and maybe I'll do a new guide, an update guide. And either way, thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys in whatever else, whatever other video I do next. And if you're watching this on release day, have some fun with Rights of Man. I'm having a great time, and I'll see you guys later. Bye-bye.